Welcome to Logistics Business Conversations, where we talk with key spokespeople in the logistics industry about topical issues. Hosted by Peter Macleod, editor of Logistics Business magazine.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the latest Logistics Business Conversations podcast. My name is Peter Macleod, editor of Logistics Business magazine, and I'm your host for today's podcast entitled Warehouse Automation, Can You Afford Not to? This edition is brought to you in association with Linde Material Handling UK, and it's my great pleasure to introduce to you today my two learned guests, Malcolm Porter and Dan Wood, who are the automation sales managers for Linde Material Handling UK. Malcolm, welcome to Logistics Business Conversations. Please could you introduce yourself to the listener and tell us a little bit more about your role at Linde?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. So I'm Malcolm Porter. I am one of the automation sales managers covering Scotland and the north of England for Linde here in the UK. So I've been Linde for now just going on 5.5 years and joined the automation side of the business at the beginning of this year.
And welcome to our show also, Dan. And tell us a little bit about the territory you cover and where does your expertise lie?
Thank you also, Peter. Yes, so I'm also automation sales manager for Linde. I cover the central belt of England. Again, likewise, I've been with the business now for just in excess of 6 years and covering the automation piece for nearly 2 years now.
Great. Well, you know what? I expect I'm not alone in thinking, Linde is a name we associate with warehouse equipment. You could almost say it's been there right from the start. Traditional warehouse equipment, in my opinion, is forklift trucks and warehouse trucks. But of course, now we're moving into automation at a vast pace. So tell us a little bit about Linde and where it sits in the entire MHE materials handling equipment marketplace.
So Linde, many will be familiar with the brand name. We've obviously been a market leader for some years now within material handling. Established 120 years ago, actually, this year. Always driven by quality and the latest innovations. We've got in excess of 700 locations sort of worldwide, over 9,000 people within both our sales and service organisations, and over 1 million forklift trucks operating in the world. Obviously, we've also ventured into newer marketplaces as technology has developed over the years. I think we like to see ourselves as a company that very much looks to help our customer base by advancing technologies to suit, looking at user friendliness, performance that drives businesses forwards, versatility and reliability, certainly for the long haul, is certainly associated with the Linde brand name.
Yes, and Malcolm, obviously, the move into automation that the industry is undergoing, Linde's been a leader in that. So what do you think are the factors that have helped to grow the automation demand, some of the challenges that are out there in the marketplace that automation is helping to overcome?
Yeah, there is a lot of challenges, and I think a lot of it's around customer perception on what can and can't be done. So things like cost is a big factor with it, where companies see that automation as a much more expensive option compared to the manual handling side of things. So she's helping customers understand that change and that kind of dynamic. Applications sometimes can be a bit of a hindrance towards automation, depending on what flow conditions are like, whether it is pallet types, the loads that they're handling, the loads that are moving. So sometimes it is just a change in what the customer does with the product and a change in the process that we just need to kind of, as Linde, as the kind of consultants, need to kind of talk them through the differences.
And is it fair to say that the labour shortages that we're seeing, not just in the UK or Europe-wide, but globally, are also helping to push towards greater levels of automation?
Yes, definitely. Certainly in the UK, we've seen a massive increase in customers and conversations with customers, where we're seeing major shortages of workers that used to come across kind of pre-Brexit, for instance, the manufacturing construction industry, where it's been a very labour-intensive task. We've seen massive increases in customers coming to us and saying, look, we need to look at something. We can't get skilled workers. I've had a number of customers over the years with like some V&A truck drivers, where it's been a skilled operator they've needed for that particular processing truck, and they can't get hold and they can't get the drivers that are qualified to operate them. And then they're finding when they do get the drivers, they're moving on and changing industry. So yeah, there is a massive shortage in labour, and also that's then driving automation as a more viable option for customers because they simply can't get the resources.
Yes, Dan, sometimes we hear that automation, oh no, it's coming to take our jobs, but actually what it's doing is helping to keep the wheels of industry turning. But automation may not be suitable for everyone. I just wondered if you could help sort of clear up some of the misconceptions you sometimes hear. You know, you're out there on the coalface yourselves, some of the misconceptions you sometimes hear about automation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Malcolm's already alluded to a couple of those with regards to first impressions around automation, with regards to initial expense, certain applications being suitable or not suitable. I think ultimately, if people are open to looking for better efficiencies, better productivity, and ultimately all led by an ROI, which will justify that automation would be the right step forward for any business. I think the misconceptions that we clearly have initially will be that initial leap of faith, and notwithstanding obviously the impressions that some people get that it's coming to replace jobs, when in fact we talk to a lot of businesses with regards to seconding potential drivers, for instance, into tasks that will ultimately give them better fulfillment in the roles that they do. So we're obviously replacing those mundane tasks that people tend to job hop ultimately, meaning that obviously the ability to keep people in positions such as forklift drivers become more challenging. But like I say, ultimately, the misconceptions, I believe, around automation can always be overcome with some in-depth discussions with the right people. Ultimately, the limitations within technologies and energy in particular can be a doubt for people. We can enlighten them with regards to some of the newer technologies that we adapt within lithium and fast charge technology. And ultimately, through our consultative approach, we can alleviate any of those doubts and misconceptions that do arise within the automation discussions that take place.
And I guess making a valid ROI argument, a return on investment argument versus cost, is very much part of the sales process.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah. So we will consult with the customer to discuss what their current overheads are with regards to both people, infrastructure, standard labour rates, and obviously the costs that are associated with standard labour rates. We've got to remember that things like HR and welfare facilities will need to be required as well in order to facilitate people. So ultimately, we'll do an in-depth analysis looking at the whole business and how it will be affected by introducing automation. So it's not necessarily just the people or the manual trucks that you're replacing, but also things like lost time through breaks and sickness, damage caused to infrastructure by obviously people at the end of the day can make mistakes. They can hit racking. They can damage the forklifts themselves. So all of these things are taken into account versus obviously automated kit that would be coming in that can run on sort of longer times and show more productivity and throughput ultimately at the end of the day.
So, Malcolm, it sounds like the implementation of automation isn't just a question of buying the equipment that's required to carry out a specific task. When you choose your automation partner, you need to have somebody who's prepared to go in on a consultative basis. So how does Linde approach that? You know, what's your company approach to a business that you see requires automation, and how important is it to get the right automation partner?
Yeah, Peter, you're absolutely correct in saying that, it's not as simple as ordering a manual truck and having it delivered. At the end of the day, there is much more in-depth discussions that customers have to have with the likes of ourselves. So we have a team of people up and down the UK just to talk you through the process. So we have our dedicated sales team for the manual truck side of it, but they're also highly trained on the automation side of it as well. When they come across a customer that's interested in automation, they will then pass them on to people like Dan and myself, who will then kind of take the reins, if you like, and have much more in-depth discussions with the customer to discover why and find out why they want to look at automation, what are the reasons behind it, whether there is a justification for the ROI, whether it is staff shortages, whatever that issue may be, or whatever the reason is from going to automation or wanting to look at automation. We'll then take that, we will discuss more details in throughput, site, truck specification, what they're looking to do, and we'll look at it as more of a solution sale, a more consultative solution sale rather than an individual truck. Once we've then got all the details with the customer, we'll go through things like the ROI, we'll go through, we have another tool called Flow Plan, which will take them through and identify what trucks, what AGVs, what AMRs, what pieces of automation kit they would require to hit their throughput, so that we can show them on simulations and show them in detail before they have to put their hand in their pocket, that we can identify how many trucks they will need, what the utilisation would be, what the availability to upscale production, for instance, without having the initial additional cost of extra trucks or extra machines. Once we go through all that process, with it, we can then put a proposal together to that customer that is in depth. It covers as much of the bases as possible to answer all the customer's queries, questions, concerns that they may have. We also have the availability of our demo centres, which we can take customers to and show them actual products in operation in a demo theatre. Or we can take them to customer sites that we have reference sites up and down the UK that we can take them to show them actual product in live applications, just to let them see how comfortable our trucks are operating in live applications, to let them see that we can be a trusted partner to them. Not hold their hand, but just guide them through the process, because it's not a straightforward process necessarily. And there are a lot of issues and concerns that customers may have investing a substantial amount of time and money into a project that is not necessarily within their wheelhouse.
And Dan, you must have some stories from being on the road over the years, but maybe some of those we'll have to save for another podcast. One thing I wanted to ask you, though, is, I imagine you come across customers who think they need automation but maybe don't, or the opposite would be customers who don't think they need automation, but you can actually say, well, yes, we've identified that automation is suitable for you. So how do you go about sort of identifying the automation need, potentially identifying low-hanging fruit when it comes to making operational gains?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Peter. I think there's definitely a marketplace where automation isn't applicable, and certainly a marketplace where automation is. And I think it's sort of breaking down those barriers to enlighten and educate the marketplace at sometimes as well. We quite regularly get requests for what sort of a finger in the air budget cost would automation cost me, and it certainly isn't as easy as that, because it's sort of based by each application and what their throughput requirements are, and obviously there are niches within every given application for sure. I think when we talk about sort of low-hanging fruit and the easy way to identify where automation will thrive, is those repetitive sort of mundane tasks that we see, that the A to B movements that are regular, that happen throughout shifts or multiple shifts even, which would give much better ROIs. And I think that in a nutshell it is the simplistic way of looking at it for sure. But ultimately we work with full warehouses. In fact, we have reference sites. We have full functioning warehouses where products dropped off at the door and ultimately fed into a conveyor that is sort of wholly works on its own from automation once it hits the door right to the outbound function. So there is very little limitations to what we can do. But certainly if I don't know, one truck user that sort of operated a truck 1 or 2 hours a day, for me, that shouldn't necessarily be considering automation, certainly from an ROI perspective, because ultimately, when we look at it, we are looking at sort of bums being on seats for relatively long periods of time in order to be able to sort of justify the changeover to an automated truck that can increase that productivity or throughput, or like I say, do those mundane tasks, those A to B movements for sure.
And I've often heard over the years that some of the barriers to automation can lie in its relative inflexibility. So how do you overcome that? Say you're a small 3PL that is only getting 2-year, 3-year contracts, and down the road they may have to completely change the profile of the goods that are passing through the warehouse. So how do you overcome that as a supplier of automation, and how do you make as much as you can the equipment as scalable as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in most projects we always sort of discuss that scalability from the off, and quite often when people do initially venture into automation, it will be with a phased approach. So we'll identify where can we get the most significant benefits, productivity, throughputs, and ROIs within their sort of whole function, as it were.
So with automation, one of the perhaps misconceptions is that it can't be particularly scalable. So how does Linde approach a customer which perhaps is a bit concerned about what shape its business might be in the next 2-3 years?
No, you're absolutely right, Peter. I think when we approach any customer, we always have in mind that we can bring it as a phased approach, and a lot of customers that are venturing into automation for the first time do absolutely do that. They take a phased approach, and we'll try and identify where the most throughput and productivity can be gained in the initial stages. So it might be one flow, for instance, such as an inbound function, but ultimately it's infinitely scalable to a degree, and we'll try and take that holistic approach at the beginning to say, here's what it could look like as a fully functioning automated warehouse facility, and then we can scale it back from there and say, right, this is a phased approach where we can identify where you will see the greatest return initially, and then we can ramp it up as the months and years go by in order for it to suit them, and potentially make any adjustable changes. And I think within the 3PL, it's a very interesting one, because you're absolutely right with regards to sort of fixed contracts and potential changes within flows. You can absolutely change anything with regards to automation when we bring it in. So load dimensions can change, or flows and routes can change, and all we'd need to do, depending on the product type and variation, is to either come back in and recommission, or we can even write those flows in at the front end, so that we can switch it from one system to another depending on what the customer's needs are.
Malcolm, what about in terms of implementation? Is there likely to be much disruption to business when an automated solution is implemented? And also, I've picked up that Linde talks about having an holistic approach to implementation. Perhaps you can explain a little bit more what's meant by that.
Yeah, it is. I suppose there's a perception that it will be a massive disruption to the business. And again, it will depend on what kind of process we're implementing, how big a project it is, and where in that customer's process it fits into. But ultimately, this starts back right from the start, from the order point. So once the truck is ordered, or once the trucks are ordered, assign a project manager to the order from basically the second day of the order being processed, and that's where the work starts. So that's where the communication between our project managers and the customer's IT team, their customer's project management team, if there is a new building going up, the contractors, etc. So we start that working process right from the outset, so that we do as much of the work as possible before the trucks arrive on site. So we can do a lot of the planning, we can do a lot of the technical stuff behind the scenes, so that there's as little interruption to the customer's process as possible. But obviously when it does come to delivery, if there is a process that we need to work around, and we've done it with customers in the past where we're actually working in a live site where there is trucks moving around, product moving around, but we're going in and our engineers will work around the customer. It may take a little bit longer, but we try and aim for as little disruption to the customer as possible. And where possible, we can work around them to implement that as easily and as painless as possible. But ultimately, it's all about communication. It's having those open conversations with the customer. It's making sure the customer is comfortable and aware from the outset of what our needs are from a supplier, what our expectations are, and what their expectations are as well, and what they expect from us. So we have a clear plan in place. So when it does come to implementation and delivery, that it does have as little interruption as possible to the customer.
And Dan, we were talking earlier about how important it is to choose the right supplier of automation. And this sort of leads me to the area of the topic of VDA 5050, the standard communication interface for AGVs, which is a big talking point right now. I've spent a lot of time in Germany talking to, for example, the VDMA, where things seem to be a lot of decisions seem to be made, and bringing the industry together to create this common interface. Can you just explain a little bit more to us, sort of why it's important to boost the continued growth of the automation sector through the VDA 5050 standard, and what part Linde is playing in its establishment as the de facto interface?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for those who obviously don't know what VDA 5050 is, with regards to sort of any automation being introduced to a customer's site, ultimately there is a layer of interface for the robot managers in order to communicate with the periphery, if you like, around the site, whether that be the WMS or ERP systems, or COM boxes, fire alarms, all the things that we do look to plug into and can plug into. Ultimately, when customers are looking to move into that automation arena, they need to be very aware of this from a future-proofing concept. Ultimately, people that will conform, or suppliers that will conform to VDA 5050 are saying that they have an open bandwidth in order to be able to communicate with different robot managers that might be within the marketplace, for instance, or different interfaces. So ultimately what we're looking to do with VDA 5050 is lead the way in both educating and enabling the future-proofing of automation for our customer base. And I think that customers really need to be aware of its existence in order to be able to future-proof anything that they do bring into their own business from an automation perspective, and make sure that it has the ability to be able to plug in, if you like, into future concepts that might come and that they might bring into their own business.
This sounds like a very worthy industry-wide collaboration to prevent us from ending up in a kind of a VHS Betamax type of situation. And I could see how important that would be for the growth of automation, for the industry players to bang their heads together and get this sorted out. And of course, as you say, Linde playing a very, very big part in that. We did touch at the beginning on the fact that Linde is a supplier of what I would describe as traditional MHE. I'm a great fan of the forklift truck. So guys, please don't tell me that forklift trucks are dying. Is there still a place for the traditional forklift in today's modern automated warehouse?
Yeah, look, there absolutely is. I think we've already touched upon the fact that, look, not everything can be automated, but we are, from certainly Linde's perspective, certainly in this arena with conventional, traditional forklift trucks for years to come, and there's still significant amounts of R&D that are going into our standard historical truck offering, if you like. And I loathe me a little bit to call it historical, because we're still advancing with new models, AI that comes into sort of safety features that we've recently launched. Again, all in tandem with conventional and traditional forklifts. The marketplace never stands still. So significant amounts of R&D are still going into the traditional forklift, and I think it'll be around for years to come.
Dan, I suppose also a lot of the technologies that are being developed for what you describe as the traditional forklift trucks, the traditional equipment, is also being developed in tandem with the automated products as well. And that sort of makes me think around battery technologies, advanced battery technologies. Can you tell us a little bit more about where Linde is in those areas, please?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as with anything, R&D never stops. We're always striving for more efficiency, better productivity. So we never sort of stand still or rest on our laurels, that's for sure. I think actually automation from a Linde perspective, and energy in particularly with regards to some of the battery technology, we're actually sort of market leading with some of the energy that we're able to offer within our automation piece at the minute. So LTO batteries, which are a form of lithium, but much higher in density, we're actually able to offer significantly shorter charge times. So within some of our product range, within our Elmatic, for instance, we can go from around about 25% charge to 95% charge in as little as around 15 minutes through an automated charger on lithium technology, which I think the wider marketplace would still be certainly striving for on traditional trucks, and notwithstanding obviously that we do still offer obviously lithium with shorter charge times within our traditional fleets. But features such as that really do impress the productivity and throughput benefits that we can achieve through our automation.
Well, when it comes to energy supply, it's almost going to lead on to another new conversation. And I know for a fact that your group, the Keon Group, are taking a lead when it comes to developing, for example, hydrogen cell technology, hydrogen fuel cell technology. But again, I believe that's a conversation for another day. I'm looking at the clock and thinking now it's ticking remorselessly, and it's now bringing us to the end of this edition of Logistics Business Conversations. So I wanted to just say thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure talking with you both today, Malcolm and Dan. Thank you for your contribution and for enhancing our knowledge about automation in the warehouse. I also like to thank you, the listener, for choosing to download this edition of Logistics Business Conversations. Be the first to hear about the next one by subscribing to us